Welcome everyone to the 30-minute Midas touch from beautiful Dyersburg, Tennessee at the Herb Welsh Wrestleplex. Now, here is pound for pound and inch for inch, the best of the best in professional wrestling today. A wrestling genius worth his weight in gold. The Golden Boy, Greg Anthony.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 30-minute Midas touch. I am your host, the Golden Boy, Greg Anthony. And with me, as always, is my co-host, Feed Me More, Mark Tipton.
Oh, my goodness, feed me more. Well, that's a very clear reference to a particular individual, and I certainly look forward to talking about that and what you have to say on that subject and so forth. However, before we get to that, there's a subject I want to bring up and discuss. This is obviously a wrestling podcast, and we want to talk about professional wrestling, and we will in just a moment. But before we do that, it is important to note that this podcast is being recorded on September the 11th. Now, that's a date that means a lot to a great many people, and I know some of the people who listen to this may not have been alive when it happened, but it is a important date and a sad anniversary that it is important that we acknowledge and recognize the events, the approximately 3,000 lives that were lost at the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and a field in Pennsylvania when the passengers on board, I believe was Flight 93, fought back when they realized what was happening on that day. I do want to make sure we remember that and speak about that before we get back to the much less, in the grand scheme of things, much less important subject, professional wrestling. We did want to mention that. And as a side note, to kind of marry in the subject of professional wrestling, the first live event that took place on the Thursday was a live edition of SmackDown. And that was the first gathering of its size, to my recollection, that took place anywhere in America after the attack of 9/11. And obviously, I'd like to talk a little bit about that because that's obviously a real tough decision Vince McMahon faced on that day.
Yeah. I mean, one thing, too, is, this is the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. And it kind of dawned on me today is that this is the last year that I'll be able to say not that I remember a time with that before 9/11, but I'm 40 years old, so that means that happened when I was 20, and it's 20 years old, which means next year it's going to be the majority of my life
has been since
9/11. So in the world we live in, changed because of it. And like you said, I was proud because I was wrestling at that point. And I was proud when WWE decided, hey, we're not going to run and hide or cancel shows. We're going to do this. And it may come from a Vince McMahon standpoint of the show must go on and never canceling anything and, that kind of situation, money situation in itself maybe. But either way, he made the decision. And what we got was still one of the most stirring renditions of the Star Spangled Banner
in
history that still gives me goosebumps to this day. And just the seeing everyone kind of, I don't want to say break character, but like kind of strip everything down, like realize the importance of what was going on.
Yes, it certainly seemed appropriate to kind of dial back because I think I might have used the word perspective, but I intended to, but because as much as important as professional wrestling is to us, perspective does dictate that it takes a back seat in something like this. And I do appreciate you giving a little credit to the great Lillian Garcia who performed that national anthem. I got to hear her sing the anthem a number of times at live events I attended over the years, and she always did a great job, but none better than she did on that day.
Absolutely. And her famous, our flag was still there, that she really emphasizes that part of the song, which most people kind of do, but not like she does. I don't know where if someone suggested it to her, or she heard it somewhere else, or whatever it was. But either way, she knocked it out of the park for sure. So, yeah. Are you ready to move on to our main subject of the day?
Certainly we can. And I will say, just for historical purposes, having a a large gathering of people at that moment was a tough decision because, quite frankly, no one could be certain that there weren't other sleeper cells that would have seen an event like that as an opportunity to
Right.
continue the attack. There's no way to know it on that date. So I'm certainly one who criticizes Vince McMahon a great deal, probably more than I should. But on this one, I certainly will not criticize him for this.
Yeah.
And with that, there's no great way to move on to our other subject once we move past that. But basically, we wanted to discuss a concept of professional wrestling, and I believe you have some examples and kind of have an idea you want to lay out about it. And that is about the concept that less is more.
Less is more. It's been said to me the entire time I've been in professional wrestling. Like it was one of those written in stone kind of rules. You know what I mean? And like the problem I have with a lot of today's wrestling is that they think that all that kind of stuff was just decided on a whim. You understand? Like all those decisions that were made were decided on a whim. So everyone's trying to change stuff, but they're just changing stuff just to change it. And one of the big things I see is the less is more thing. Like now they're trying to say more is more, right? Prime example is this past week with the All Out pay-per-view, and Meltzer called the Bucks and Lucha Brothers tag match the greatest cage match of all time. And that is absolutely absurd because I watched the match and they did a lot of innovative, cool things, but at the same time, it was just a hodgepodge of video game, whatever. You know what I mean? And I beg to differ that, I think it would have been much better if there still would have been like we talk about, a shine, a heat, a comeback, and a finish. Like, how hard is it to really follow something that's been time tested for a century that works?
Right, and there's no good way to get into it. Maybe it's recency bias or whatever you want to say. This is not the first time that Dave Meltzer in particular has done something of this nature. There's the infamous Omega Okada match, which gained 6 stars. We've referenced it magically, although the scale had always been to 5.
Right.
And so, but actually, in doing so, he kind of demonstrated the problem, in my opinion, of what they were doing. He decided, well, I've always gone to 5 stars, and that was the best I could do, but I really want to top that. So how do I top? Well, I'll make this a 6-star match, which then makes, well, then what does any of it mean? It's just whatever you've seen most recently. And I was watching the match, and they did a number of big things in there, and that's fine, but it's not dramatically different than a number of other matches I've seen performed by various promotions. And I don't know exactly what it is, other than it's the most recent, makes it that much better than any other cage match / tag match. Because now when you say cage, now in my mind you're including war games.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, also, like my favorite cage match of all time is actually Triple H versus Ric Flair at, was it Taboo Tuesday, or it was something,
Ooh.
Cyber Sunday maybe. It was one of those events. But either way, it was where they picked it to me, and just because I believe that's the perfect blueprint for a cage match. It was gritty, it was real, it was bloody, it was it was everything you want a cage match to be. The only thing I don't like about it, obviously, is in cage matches is the escape to win clause. I would much rather have the cage match is designed for either to keep someone in or keep someone out. So the fact that you can escape it kind of defeats the purpose, right?
Right.
So that's the only aspect that I don't like that WWE has obviously used and changed over the years. But nonetheless, the crux of the match is between Triple H and Flair was my favorite one of all time, and it was so brutal and so bloody and there was so much emotion behind it, that kind of thing. And like I don't see too many cage matches that can top that.
Right, and I believe a few minutes ago I said something about criticizing Vince McMahon Well, here we go. The escape the cage rule, or however you want to think. To me, that was something that was really a Vince McMahon thing. It was really popularized by the WWF at the
Yeah,
time.
no one else did that.
And I don't remember anyone certainly before that. And I'm sure his argument would be that it added an element of drama because you could have a guy trying to escape and the other guy pulling him back in.
Well,
that kind of thing.
I think he was more or less looking at it as we're going to get a different kind of finish. Like, no matter what the guys do, there's going to be a 1-2-3 finish most of the time, right? Well, this is, a race to the finish kind of thing, and I think that's what they were going for. I don't know whose concept it was. I don't know if that was Pat Patterson, God rest his soul, but damn you, Pat, for ruining cage matches for me for 30 years. But yeah, it all goes back to what what our subject is today of less is more.
Right. Well, and I guess the thing that was most dissatisfying to me as a member of the audience was the referee opening the cage door as they approached.
Yeah.
That just no. The whole point was that they were encased. There, no way out. They even named a pay-per-view out of that and I believe that involved the elimination chamber. It's kind of there's no way out, but they constantly have the door open. Or have people climb over the top of the cage.
Okay.
So it's more like it's a minor inconvenience rather than
right.
a cage.
Right. So, and also, like you said, Vince McMahon and WWE are the ones that primarily did this and created this concept of the escape to win the cage. And then, probably 15, 20 years later after they did that, they decided, well, we actually do need a cage that no one can escape, so they created Hell in a Cell.
Right. Well, they had to do that because
but then what did they do? The
first match they ripped the door off the cage.
Right.
Excuse me, I got a little animated there.
Yeah, I mean, even though it was it was even before that though. Like it wasn't just that Kane ripped it off, and they got out before that.
Yes.
And came back in, and then he ripped it off.
Right.
So it's like they still escaped the cage.
Right. And of course, then we were talking about less is more. Well, what do you have to? Well, now we have to get on top of the cage.
Yeah.
It's not enough to be in the cage.
Yeah, because he fell off the side. He fell off halfway up the side. So
right.
The next step would be
now we have to climb up on top of it.
Now every time there's a Hell in a Cell, that's what people expect.
Right. If you don't climb on top of it, then it's a letdown now.
Right.
Those sorts of things are a disappointment. Although I suppose, in fairness, it did get us one of the legendary moments, as Mick Foley thought.
But
Mick Foley said he felt he had to top the first one.
But what if? Just hear me out for a second here. What if that was the only Hell in a Cell that anyone ever got on the top? Was that one? You know what I mean? We never saw Shane McMahon up there. We never saw Kevin Owens up there. We never saw all the other bullshit that's happened. No one else did that except him. How as memorable as it is, it's impossible to recreate too. Now it's like the last time Shane McMahon jumped off the cell and crashed, it was obviously a crash pad under the thing
well, it's Shane McMahon.
It's Shane McMahon, but still, I mean, that kind of stuff kills my suspension of disbelief. It's like, it's phony by, well, they set that up there, so they knew he was going to do something.
Yeah, I certainly did, and maybe that's it. We're talking about less is more, and Mick Foley is going to be someone who I admire, but he's going to be someone that you have to look at during his career. He certainly didn't do less is more. He did a great deal of very over the top things. He was at one point known as the King of the Death Match.
But he did them. He didn't do 100 of them a match.
No.
If he took that Nest T bump, is what he called it, when he was on the apron and they bump him off and he take the flat back bump backwards, he called that the Nest T bump because it was like the Nest T dive commercial.
Nest T plunge.
Yeah, yeah. So but he would only do that once in a match. Nowadays, guys will do that 2, 3, 4, 5 times. How many super kicks did we have in the greatest cage match of all time, as Meltzer says?
Well, now the Canadian Destroyer is only a 2 count.
Yeah.
I saw it this week.
Yeah. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
No.
See, the first time I saw the Canadian Destroyer, I don't know if I've ever told the story or not, but first time I saw Petey Williams do that, right? I lost my shit. I was like, holy fuck, that was amazing, right? And in my mind, wrestling 80s, protection of the business mind, I'm thinking, well, that guy's dead. He's gonna be gone for a while, right? Because he just took a flipping fucking pile driver. And then the next week he was just like in a regular match, I think. And it's like it kind of dawned on me. I was like, oh, they're just gonna use it as a finish, as a regular move. I mean,
Right.
To me, Petey should have had a finish, and then he should have had that for when shit really got down and dirty, and that guy ended up having a neck brace or a wheelchair or whatever. But now we're so far away from that. Now it's not even, like you said, it's a 2 count. Usually at the beginning of the match.
Oh yeah, very early in the match.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's so disheartening to see stuff like that, because here at Pro Wrestling in South, we're trying to create that old school feel and make everyone believe everything we do. And like when they tune on Wednesday nights and they see bullshit like that, that hurts us indirectly.
Yes, that one stuck in my mind because I did see it as I was watching wrestling during the week, and I saw that as a 2 count. I'd kind of that, along with the super kick now being essentially a clothesline or a punch, which is really what it is now for many. I guess, and this was something that people have criticized. Well, criticism was leveled at Mick Foley. Now, they didn't follow through with it, but I remember it was going to be brought up as part of a storyline. They had Dean Ambrose kind of going at Mick Foley because he was seen as the guy promoting pushing the envelope. Mm-hmm. And I guess what we're saying is, if you want to do something as an ending, a big thing that happens that's memorable, that's one thing. And that's where less is more is what it's about.
Yeah.
It's about saying, hey, that's something. The Super Bowl isn't every week. The Super Bowl is once a year. And although it is essentially a football game, like one of the hundreds of others that we watch, it is something special and set apart.
Yeah.
And that's why you get the pageantry around it. And so it's something to be said that you don't necessarily do. Well, every match can't be the main event. Maybe that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I want to go too. Was if you watch today's match, like not every match can be Ricky Steamboat
and Savage.
Yes. The 25 false finishes. Like not every match, and you have to realize how many years of straight comeback finishes. 99.9% of all matches were pretty much just a straightforward whatever. You know what I mean? Before they ever did that 25 false finishes, and then that, obviously that meant something then. But it's about doing that kind of stuff at the right time. There needs to be, the fans need to sit there and they need to watch. Hey, when this guy makes his comeback like this and hits this finish, it's over. Same thing with a heel. If he ends up hitting his finish, it's over. It's not a finish unless, guess what? It finishes people, right? So another thing that's just been lost in translation over the years. I don't understand the concept of hitting your finish to let a guy kick out of it, and especially, I don't know if you remember a couple years ago there was that weird time where everyone was hitting their finish the very first thing of the match, like running and hitting their finish to get the 1-2 kick out in the first 3 seconds, literally. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that kind of stuff is just asinine. Like, I've had guys ask me if they can do that on our shows, and I'm like, no.
Right. Well, then it becomes and I'll hear the announcers mention it. Well, it took 5 rock bottoms to keep him down. It took 6 or 7 F5s for Brock Lesnar to, whatever. Like that's some kind of measure.
No, and that's what it's the other way. It's not that, he sustained 5 rock bottoms. Well, that guy's rock bottoms must be shitty if it took 5 of them.
To beat the guy.
To beat the guy. So it diminishes both guys, really. But no one sees it like that anymore, even though that's how inherently people are going to see it when they watch it. You understand? Like if you're watching a movie and a guy, takes his gun out and like, and sprays a thing like, and the guy that he's shooting at doesn't get any, whatever, and then all of a sudden the one guy takes one bullet and shoots the guy dead, you're gonna go, oh, that's bullshit. You know what I mean? And it's kind of what it is. I don't know if I know you're not on social media, but like on my Facebook the other day, I actually something that I've posted the last couple of years because it comes with my memories, but it's the concept that professional wrestling nowadays is like watching a basketball game, to where every time the team scores, either team scores, the score stays 0-0. And then late in the fourth quarter, someone hits a shot and they go up 2-0, and that's how they win the game. Right? That's how I feel professional wrestling is. Is like the only move that matters is the last move. Everything else is just kind of whatever.
All right, and I will be fair there because I'm trying to, as always, I try to mention this from the audience perspective. There's a, I don't mind a little bit of that. There has, well, too much of anything is what we're talking about. When that becomes every match, then when someone does a roll up for a 1-2-3, it can't be that that's a letdown. That is an ending of a wrestling match.
Right.
You can't act like we're disappointed when that's the way it ended because we didn't have 6 flips and 3 chairs involved at the time.
Yeah, and the same thing happened with ECW too. I mean, they, how many times can you see New Jack jump off the balcony? The first couple times he did it, it was cool and like, holy shit, the guy's nuts, But then after a while, you knew it was going to happen, so it wasn't a surprise anymore. And literally, you wouldn't gasp or anything. You just kind of like, nah, that kind of thing. So I mean, it's mind numbing sometimes to know what works and how to do things and things that you were taught growing up, and all of a sudden there's this group of people that are trying to take the business in the other direction, and you're fighting very, very hard to keep it in the right direction.
All right, I guess a way I want to try to express this, and from where I'm coming from, is the way that I feel that, and you referenced this when you talked about the Savage Steamboat at Mania and that kind of thing. We're doing something there is okay, but for me, pay-per-views in general have been devalued. And what I mean by that is when I watch pay-per-views, oftentimes it feels not remarkably different than an edition of Raw. It feels like maybe a glorified edition of Raw.
Yeah.
They're the same time frame. You see a lot of the same people. And oftentimes on Raw, the next night you see a rematch of what you saw the night before on pay-per-view. And I think that diminishes the importance of seeking the pay-per-view.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's actually a very good point. But also, so once again, this stuff is not a whim. Like people tried this and tested it, and like this worked, and that's why they kept doing it for all those years, because they fucking finally figured out the formula, right? And one of the formulas was show the guys on television, let people see that they're stars, right? But make them pay to see the big money matches. Don't give away your big money matches on free television, right? And that became a thing of the past too, because all of a sudden we start chasing ratings.
Right.
Instead of protecting the business as far as our houses and the times we're really, really going to make money, that kind of thing. So like, and nowadays it's just like that too. Like you said, if you watch a lot of this stuff, like there's going to be 35 false finishes on Raw. You know what I mean? And by the time they get to the pay-per-view, it'll be 50. But I mean,
right.
That doesn't make it feel more special. It just makes it feel more cluttered.
Okay, well, I guess as a recent example, one of the things that was somewhat questionable, but I suppose the all-out pay-per-view, the main event was Kenny Omega against Christian.
Yeah.
However, approximately 2 weeks before the pay-per-view, on Rampage, they had Kenny Omega versus Christian.
Right.
Now, I guess you could say that having them wrestle in what was a relatively short match, I acknowledge, that was a way to say, hey, I want to see some more of this, maybe would have been the argument. But my thought was, why don't we wait until we see these two really get at each other on the pay-per-view?
Yeah. That's just one. I think they wanted to bump Rampage is what they wanted to do. They wanted to give it something special, something meaty to put on. So Christian winning the Impact title was what they wanted. But like you said, it all out, the 3 main event matches, the MJF Jericho, Punk Darby, and then Christian and Omega, those were actually old school matches. You know what I mean? There was actually shine, heat, comeback, finish. Everything was pretty much like an old school formula. And heaven forbid, everyone's like, oh, they were so great, blah blah blah. Well, no shit. I mean, that's what I get so mad about. People are like, oh, old school doesn't work anymore. No one wants to believe that shit. I was like, every time we give them old school shit, they fucking lose their mind. You know what I mean? So how I don't understand how people can even fathom that this stuff doesn't work.
Okay, well, you broached into a subject that had been in the back of my mind I wanted to talk about, and that is the CM Punk match. As I watched it, now obviously I like a lot of people, a lot of members of the audience hadn't seen CM Punk perform in 7 years, and obviously ring rust is something I was thinking about, and I thought, well, and I was almost anticipating, well, what's he really going to pull out? It's been 7 years, his first chance back in the ring. What's he going to do? What's he going to pull out? What's it going to be? And then when I watched the match, I would describe what he did during the match was very basic. Would it be fair for me to say that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was very meat and potatoes. I mean, there was no super flashy whatever. And that's the thing, too. He hit 2 go-to-sleeps, but the first go-to-sleep, Darby fell out of the ring.
Which is a reason why the pin wouldn't have happened.
It was,
and that made sense to me.
Yeah, so then when he hit the second one, though, he pinned him, 1, 2, 3, and there was no kick out or anything like that. Once he hit a finish, it led straight to the finish. That's if you're going to do multiple finishes, that's the way to do it. I actually had someone message me that's a trainee and said that it was cool to see that the go to sleep and fall out of the ring because I only see that at your shows.
Right.
Because people don't think about that stuff anymore. But like I said, the only thing I didn't like about the Darby Punk match was my gripe before was that Darby's a babyface, and as soon as Punk showed up in AEW, he became the biggest babyface in professional wrestling. So having him against another babyface, to me, felt a little like working against each other. And if you watch the match, there's a point there where the people are just waiting for Punk to win. They're just waiting for him to get the win because they know he's going to win.
Right.
So they're just waiting for him to win. And I don't think they would have had that if they would have had someone to hate in place of that. You know what I mean?
I will say that, and just kind of to extend the point, outside of the go-to-sleeps, what I saw during much of the match was collar and elbow tie-ups and the abdominal stretch.
Shades of Wilbur Snyder.
Oh, there you go. A name flew right past me. I hate to admit that, but it did. That one flew. And those were the things I saw, and maybe you could tell me if I was wrong, and what I thought this match exemplified, because I certainly didn't think under any circumstances CM Punk was going to lose his return match. I don't think anybody expected that. But what I would say, as I watched it go back and forth, there's a concept, and I admit I'm sidetracking us here, but this was something that was on my mind this week. It was a match that was designed to help Darby Allin get over, but not necessarily go over, is the phrase I've heard. Because when I watched what he did, he was doing his dives and bigger feats and more flashy moves and all the things that he does, and it almost felt to me like it was an instance where CM Punk was saying, trying to let him do all his things and get everybody's attention while I do very meat and potatoes, let him stand out, and then I get the win at the end. And I don't think it's held against Darby Allin because no one really expected him to win anyway.
Right. He was the underdog in the match, obviously.
Certainly.
But the fact that he had a great showing,
right,
makes him all the more capable in the eyes of the fans.
He's the up-and-coming young guy.
Yeah, and even though, like I said, I'm not a big fan of him just because when he's left, same thing with Omega. When they're left to their own devices to put together matches on their own, it's just a mess. It is literally, just a bunch of bullshit thrown together sometimes. But when you work with people that have been around and know how this business actually works, like Punk, like Christian, like Jericho, you know what I mean? Like, you get these amazing things because they're taking this young talent that we all want. We want new talent. That's the whole point of professional wrestling is who's next. You know what I mean? Like, who's the next big star? You know what I mean? Or who are we going to get behind now? You know what I mean? That was one thing that I really felt that WCW, even though they had Macho and Hogan and Sting and all the familiar face stuff like that. I mean, that was the first time we saw Benoit and Malenko and Jericho and Guerrero and like all these workhorse kind of guys that had, you know, been around. So same thing. We want new talent because let's face it, these guys that are the guys that worked the territories don't work anymore, right? Now, the only thing that's left is the guys that worked with the guys that worked the territories,
Right.
which is like me and my generation, the kind of thing. And once we're gone, what's going to happen to it from there? You know what I mean? Like, we still have to have that thought process and that that direction to go.
Certainly, and that I guess what brought that to mind is even, even in the aftermath of that match, CM Punk's appearance on Dynamite this week, he did what to me did not seem like a flashy or special in-ring promo. I'll just go and use the word promo, but it seemed to me what he did was relatively tame, but he was promoting essentially everyone else on the show. He mentioned the main event on the card that night. He mentioned the family of Brian Pillman at ringside. All those things, and then they had his setup for his next match, which was almost on there, where Taz stands up at the announce stand. Now that wasn't said, "Hey, I got a problem with you. Let's fight about it." That was very simple, but at its core, professional wrestling is, when done simply, is very effective.
Yeah, I mean, and that's you have to spoon feed it to everybody. Like professional wrestling is, you know, you want to boil whatever you're doing down to the simplest form. You know what I mean? Like we don't have time to do all these intricate angles about, you know, oh, this guy was, you know, he was kidnapped when he was 5 and that's why he's scared of the dark, and every time we turn off the lights he goes nuts. I mean, there's no point in any of that shit. You understand? It doesn't, because people know it's phony when you do that stuff. But simple things like getting slapped in the face, because everyone in their life has been slapped in the face at some point, right? And they know what that feels like. So when you slap somebody, they react. You know what I mean? So like back to what we're saying, yeah, just here's a prime example too. Remember when Triple H and Undertaker set up their match for WrestleMania without saying a word?
Yes.
You know what I mean? That was a prime example of less is more. They could have went out there and talked shit for 20 minutes and done this, but they literally booked a WrestleMania match, a main event at WrestleMania match, without saying a word.
Right. And it was one of the more memorable things, and everyone knew what was happening.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes the audience, sometimes we do want to really dumb it down, but the audience oftentimes can understand what was happening. Mm-hmm. And it was perfectly clear what was going on in that situation. Yeah. We didn't need to know how many years they'd known each other and the various dirty things that they had done to each other in the past.
Right.
Hey, I'm the Undertaker. I've got, everyone knows about the streak, and I'm looking, you know, and I'm looking to extend it, and I'm looking to make a big show at this WrestleMania. I want to put on a big show. Let's see what you got.
Absolutely. And let's take a little bit of our own advice here with less is more, because we're a little over time.
Oh, I didn't realize. I beg your pardon.
Just a little bit. We're on 33 minutes right now, so
all
not
right.
too big a deal. But for myself, the Golden Boy Greg Anthony, and my co-host, Feed Me More, Mark Tipton, thank you and goodbye.